The most painful message in a marriage is not always the one that says goodbye. Sometimes it is the one that tells you to stay calm while someone walks straight over the line. Nate Walker was standing in the small kitchen of their Portland home on a rainy Thursday evening, stirring the sauce Brooke liked with the wooden spoon she had bought at a street market years earlier, when his phone lit up beside the cutting board. Outside, rain tapped the window in thin silver lines, and the city beyond the glass was already sinking into that blue-gray evening light that made every room feel softer than it really was. Nate wiped his hand on a towel and glanced down, expecting a simple message from Brooke about traffic or whether they still had Parmesan in the fridge. Instead, he saw one sentence that made the warm kitchen feel suddenly unfamiliar. "Going on a vacation with my ex. Do not be jealous." He read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less insulting if he gave them enough chances. They did not. There was no question in the message, no apology, no explanation offered before the decision. Brooke had not asked if he was comfortable. She had not said she knew it sounded wrong. She had not even called. She had simply informed her husband that she was going away with Logan Pierce, the man who had broken her heart before Nate ever met her, and then added the instruction that made the betrayal sharper. Do not be jealous. As if jealousy were the problem. As if Nate's pain would be the immature part of the story, not the trip itself. The sauce began to bubble too hard. Nate turned the burner down and stood very still, the phone in his hand, the rain tapping steadily behind him. Brooke and Logan. A vacation. Not coffee. Not one conversation in daylight. Not closure over lunch in a public place. A vacation. The word carried suitcases, hotel reservations, long drives, quiet dinners, shared views, private hours, and all the things a wife should not casually place between herself and an old love while telling her husband to manage his feelings politely. Nate opened the message again and waited for another one to come in. Something like, "I know this is sudden," or "We need to talk," or "I should have told you sooner." Nothing came. Just the one sentence, sitting there like a signed permission slip she had written for herself. 7 years of marriage moved through his mind in pieces. Brooke laughing in his truck on the way to Cannon Beach. Brooke crying after a call from Logan years ago, telling Nate she was tired of men who made love feel unstable. Brooke sitting on the porch with coffee, her knees tucked under his old sweatshirt, saying, "You are the first person who made me feel safe." Safe. Nate used to think that was the strongest word a person could give another person. Now it felt like something she had stored away until she wanted something more exciting. He tapped the reply box. For a moment, his thumb hovered over all the words a husband could send when dignity is bleeding. "Are you serious? Why would you do this? Do you think I am stupid? Call me now. Do not go." But each sentence felt like reaching across a distance Brooke had already chosen. He deleted the blank space, breathed once, and typed only, "Understood." He sent it before he could turn pain into a paragraph. The small blue bubble appeared beneath hers, calm and almost empty. "Understood." Brooke did not answer. Nate set the phone face down on the counter. The pasta water rolled beside him. The table was already set for two. A candle burned near the window, its flame trembling each time the heater clicked on. He looked at the second plate and felt the strange humiliation of having prepared dinner for someone who had apparently been preparing to leave. Not forever, maybe. Maybe that was the part she expected him to accept. She would go, feel whatever she needed to feel, come back, and explain that nothing happened, that he was overreacting, that mature love allowed space, that trust meant silence. Nate could hear the argument before she even made it, because Brooke had been practicing softer versions of it for months. Logan needed closure. Logan was part of her past. Logan understood parts of her Nate never saw. Nate was too sensitive. Nate made things heavy. Nate should not be jealous. He turned off the stove completely. The kitchen went quieter without the simmer. He took the candle from the table and blew it out, watching the smoke curl upward into the dim air. Then he picked up his phone again, not to call her, not to argue, but to screenshot the message. The timestamp glowed at the top. Thursday, 7:14 in the evening. A simple record of the moment Brooke stopped treating their marriage like a boundary that deserved both voices. Nate saved the screenshot to a folder and named it Brooke Logan Trip. His hands were steady, which surprised him. Maybe steadiness was what happened when hurt finally passed the point of begging. He placed the uneaten dinner in containers, washed the spoon, wiped the counter, and left the second plate exactly where it was for a while, untouched beneath the quiet kitchen light. At 8 o'clock, he sat in the small home office and opened his laptop. He did not know yet how far Brooke intended to take this. He only knew he would not be waiting at the door like a loyal piece of furniture when she returned from testing the past. Outside, Portland rain kept falling, soft and relentless. Inside, Nate opened a new document and typed one word at the top, timeline. Long before Brooke sent the message that turned Nate's kitchen silent, she had told him he was the first man who made love feel safe. He remembered the exact place she said it, a pullout near Cannon Beach, with the Pacific spreading gray and endless beyond the windshield and fog hanging low over the sand. They had only been dating 6 months then, and Brooke had spent most of the drive talking too quickly, the way she did when she was trying not to cry. Logan Pierce had called her that morning after nearly a year of silence, acting casual, asking if she ever wondered what might have happened if they had met at a better time. Nate had not asked to hear the whole story, but Brooke told him anyway because back then she still believed truth was something you shared with the person trying to love you. Logan had been the man before Nate, the charming one, the unpredictable one, the man who could make a regular Tuesday feel like the first scene of a movie and then disappear before Friday with an excuse that sounded like poetry if you wanted badly enough to believe it. Brooke used to describe him as a storm she kept walking back into because the rain felt like proof something was happening. Nate was nothing like that. He did not send dramatic messages at midnight. He did not turn affection into a guessing game. He did not make Brooke chase reassurance and then reward her with just enough warmth to keep her hoping. Nate showed up. That was his gift, and, later, the thing she would learn to underestimate. When her car broke down outside Beaverton during a November rainstorm, he drove 40 minutes with jumper cables and a thermos of coffee. When she caught the flu during their first winter together, he left soup on her porch because she did not want him seeing her sick. When Logan sent a long apology email 2 weeks before Nate proposed, Nate did not demand to read it. He simply asked, "Do you need to answer him for you? Or are you answering because he still knows how to pull you back?" Brooke cried then, not because the question was cruel, but because it was the first one that made her feel responsible for the door she kept leaving open. She chose Nate, or at least he believed she did. Their wedding was small, held at a vineyard outside Dundee with string lights, wet grass, and a sky that threatened rain but never fully broke. Brooke wore her hair down, laughed through her vows, and squeezed Nate's hands as she promised to stop mistaking chaos for passion. His mother cried. Her father made a short toast about second chances. Logan was not invited, and Brooke said his absence felt like peace. For years, Nate built a life around that word. Peace. A small craftsman house in Portland with a porch that needed repainting every other summer. Saturday coffee from the same corner shop. Rain jackets by the door. Long drives to the coast when work felt heavy. Quiet dinners where the best part was not the food, but the way Brooke used to reach across the table and touch his wrist when she wanted his full attention. She said Nate made ordinary life feel like a place she could rest. He believed ordinary was not a failure of romance. It was romance after it had grown roots. But somewhere around their 6th year, Brooke began to look at those roots like they were ropes. She stopped calling their routines sweet and started calling them predictable. She began staying late after work, not doing anything suspicious at first, just stretching the hours where she did not have to come home to the quiet life she once asked for. She listened to old playlists from college while making dinner, then laughed when Nate recognized one of Logan's favorite songs. "It is just music," she said. He wanted to believe her. Belief had always been his first instinct with Brooke. Then Logan's name began returning in small, casual ways. A mutual friend had seen him in Seattle. Logan had moved back to the West Coast. Logan was working in wine distribution now, traveling between Oregon and California. Logan had apparently grown up. Nate noticed how Brooke said that last part with a softness that did not belong to an update. He did not forbid the conversations because he did not want to be the husband who acted afraid of a ghost. But he also knew ghosts become dangerous when someone starts setting a place for them at the table. Brooke would say Logan understood the version of her before bills, marriage, and routines. Nate wanted to ask if that version had also been the one crying in his truck because Logan had made her feel disposable. Instead, he stayed patient, because patience had worked before. Now, sitting in the home office after her vacation text, Nate finally understood what patience could not fix. Brooke had not forgotten that Logan hurt her. She had decided the hurt made the memory more exciting. And Nate, the man who made love feel safe, had become the one expected to stay home and prove safety meant having no boundaries at all. Logan Pierce returned to Brooke's life with the careful timing of someone who knew exactly which door had never been fully locked. It began with a harmless comment under a photo she posted from a work event in downtown Portland. "Great smile. Same one I remember from the coast." Brooke showed Nate the notification that night with a casual shrug, as if honesty after the fact made the old familiarity harmless. Nate looked at the name, then at her face, and saw the small brightness she was trying to hide. "Are you going to answer?" he asked. Brooke laughed too quickly. "It is just Logan being Logan." That sentence should have warned him because it placed the problem outside her responsibility. Logan being Logan meant charm without accountability. It meant old wounds dressed up as nostalgia. It meant the man who once disappeared could still be explained instead of judged. At first, Brooke answered in public comments, short and safe. Then Logan sent a private message about being back on the West Coast after his divorce, and Brooke mentioned it over dinner like it was nothing. "He seems different," she said, pushing vegetables around her plate. Nate kept his voice even. "Different how?" "Calmer. More grounded." The word grounded sounded strange attached to Logan, but Nate let it pass because marriage sometimes asks a person to trust before fear has enough evidence. Over the next month, Logan's messages became longer. He talked about Oregon wine country, the restaurants he worked with, the routes he drove between Portland and Napa, and the way certain places still reminded him of Brooke. He never said anything directly enough to be accused of crossing a line. That was his skill. He stood close to the boundary and let Brooke be the one to step over. He asked whether she ever missed the version of herself who did not plan every weekend around errands and home repairs. He said marriage sounded peaceful, but peaceful could become quiet in a way that made a person forget her own voice. Brooke started using phrases Nate had never heard from her before. "I feel disconnected from who I used to be. I need to process old chapters. You do not understand what it is like to have unfinished emotional business." Nate tried to listen, but each phrase had Logan's fingerprints on it. One evening, he found Brooke sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, smiling at her phone while rain ticked gently against the awning. When she noticed him, the smile vanished into something neutral. "Work?" he asked. "No." Logan sent a photo of that little diner near Cannon Beach. Nate stood in the doorway, remembering the pullout where she once said he made love safe. "And that made you smile like that?" Brooke frowned. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Make me feel guilty for remembering my life before you." He stepped back, not because he agreed, but because he recognized the trap. If he asked for respect, she would call it insecurity. If he stayed silent, the messages would grow. That was how Logan worked through a marriage without ever entering the house. He made Brooke feel young enough to resent being steady. He made Nate look like the man guarding a door instead of the man who had built a home behind it. By the time Logan suggested Napa, he did not call it a romantic trip. He called it closure with better scenery. Brooke repeated that phrase to Nate 2 nights before the text, standing by the dryer while folding towels with her phone face down beside her. "He invited me to come down for a few days," she said. "There are things we never really talked through." Nate looked at the towels in her hands, the ordinary softness of them, and felt the absurdity of discussing a vacation with her ex beside clean laundry in the house they shared. "A few days where?" "Napa Valley." "With Logan?" "Yes." "Alone?" Her jaw tightened. "You are making it sound worse than it is." Nate nodded slowly. "I am describing it." Brooke placed a towel on the counter with too much care. "It is closure, Nate. Adults can talk through old feelings without turning it into something ugly. Then why does closure need flights, hotels, and 3 days?" She looked at him then with a disappointment that felt rehearsed. "Because I knew you would react like this." That was the moment Nate saw how far the story had already been written without him. She had made his objection part of her justification. His boundary would become proof that she needed freedom. His pain would become jealousy. His marriage would become the thing she had to step outside to understand herself. 2 days later, when the message arrived in the Portland kitchen, Brooke did not create the betrayal. She only finally put it in writing. Logan had not stolen her with one invitation. He had given her a language where disrespect sounded like healing, and Brooke had chosen to speak it. The following morning, Nate woke to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the kitchen. Brooke was already up, moving through the house with quiet efficiency, her phone face down on the counter as if to keep the messages from Logan at bay. Nate poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter, watching her fold the laundry from the previous night. "We need to talk about this," he said, voice even, careful not to sound like he was blaming her. Brooke glanced up briefly, a polite nod, then returned to folding towels with meticulous precision. "About what?" she asked, the words measured, almost rehearsed. "About Logan and Napa," Nate said, putting his coffee down, letting the weight of the words fill the kitchen. She exhaled slowly, not meeting his eyes. "It's just a trip, Nate. I can handle my feelings." He shook his head, trying to find the balance between trust and self-protection. It's not just a trip when he's the one who reopened old wounds. She looked at him then, her eyes softening, revealing a flicker of doubt. "I am not the same person I was 10 years ago. I can make a choice without letting the past control me." Nate rubbed his temples. The argument was familiar, but it carried more weight now because she had been tentatively stepping toward the possibility of independence, and he had to decide how to respond without pushing her away. Over the next few days, Logan's messages became more calculated, sharing pictures of wine tastings, vineyard tours, and the coastal views that Brooke had loved before life with Nate had rooted her to responsibilities. He never asked her to meet him outside boundaries, but the tone of the messages reminded her of freedom, of a self she had tucked away to maintain a steady home. Nate noticed the change in her conversation, the way her laughter became lighter when she spoke of her old college friends, the way her gaze lingered on the phone a moment longer than necessary. It was subtle, but it was enough to make the man who built a life with her feel the edges of displacement. One evening, Brooke suggested they take a walk around the neighborhood to get out of the house. The streets were quiet, leaves rustling underfoot, a cool breeze carrying the faint smell of rain from the previous night. As they walked, Brooke spoke of memories, of moments that Logan had been part of before, painting them with affection, but leaving Nate feeling like an outsider in the story she was telling. "I never realized how much those small details mattered," she said, glancing at Nate with a soft smile that did not quite reach her eyes. He nodded, silent, understanding that the past was surfacing in a way he could not immediately control. The walk ended at a small park bench, where they sat and watched children playing in the distance, laughter echoing through the crisp air. Brooke's phone buzzed with a notification, and she glanced down quickly, her thumb hovering as if to ignore it. Nate caught the hesitation and decided not to comment, instead focusing on the present moment, the space they shared, the quiet resilience in their marriage that was being tested by echoes of old familiarity. As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, both realized that this was only the beginning of a series of challenges they would face together, navigating trust, memories, and the subtle influence of someone who had once been deeply entwined with Brooke's past. The day closed with a tentative understanding that the future required patience, communication, and an awareness of how easily the past could slip into the present, testing the boundaries of loyalty and affection in ways neither had fully anticipated. The following morning, Nate awoke to the soft gray light filtering through the curtains, the house unusually quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Brooke had already left for work, leaving her keys on the counter and a brief note reminding him about dinner plans for the evening. Nate lingered over his coffee, reflecting on the previous night's walk, the tension between them palpable yet unspoken, and the subtle ways she had begun to seek freedom in the spaces he once assumed were shared. He remembered her fingers brushing over the phone, the hesitation that suggested an awareness of Logan's presence even when physically absent, and he considered how to approach the situation without igniting unnecessary conflict. The morning passed slowly, with Nate checking the mailbox for letters and bills, the familiar rhythm of domestic life feeling suddenly foreign with the knowledge that external influences threatened the balance he had fought to maintain. Around noon, a message arrived from a mutual friend, asking if he and Brooke would attend a small gathering that evening, providing an opportunity to observe her interactions with others outside their home. Nate hesitated, considering whether attending would offer clarity or exacerbate his unease, ultimately deciding that presence was necessary to understand the undercurrents of change. By early evening, He had dressed casually, choosing comfort over style, and awaited Brooke's return. When she walked through the door, her expression was neutral, but there was a hint of anticipation in her eyes, as if she knew the events of the night held significance. They exchanged polite greetings and moved toward the car, a quiet tension accompanying each step, neither speaking until they were seated. The drive to the gathering was marked by intermittent conversation, the kind that skimmed the surface of events and responsibilities while avoiding emotional landmines. Arriving at the friend's home, they were greeted warmly, yet Nate noted Brooke's glances toward the back patio, where a small group had gathered, including friends she had known in college, their laughter and casual familiarity igniting a flicker of nostalgia. Throughout the evening, Nate observed from a subtle distance, noting the way Brooke interacted. Her gestures relaxed yet occasionally pointed toward independence, and he realized that the challenge was not confrontation but adaptation, understanding how to support her growth while maintaining their bond. As the night progressed, the couple found a quiet corner to converse, discussing their day in neutral tones while the party continued around them. Nate expressed appreciation for her openness about the upcoming projects at work and encouraged her ambitions, careful to balance acknowledgement with reassurance. Brooke responded with a nod, her eyes reflecting trust tempered with curiosity, and in that shared silence, they both recognized that growth, patience, and careful communication would be crucial in navigating the evolving dynamics of their relationship, ensuring that love, respect, and shared history remained anchors in a sea of subtle change. The evening closing with a tentative sense of understanding that the path ahead would require attentiveness, empathy, and a willingness to adapt without losing the foundation they had built together. Brooke left for Napa on Saturday morning with a cream-colored coat over her arm, a small suitcase by her feet, and the kind of calm expression people wear when they have already decided the other person's pain will be called insecurity. Nate stood near the front door of their Portland home while rain slipped down the glass in thin, crooked lines. The house smelled faintly of coffee and the cedar candle Brooke had lit before packing, as if a pleasant scent could soften the shape of what she was doing. She checked her phone twice before zipping her bag, and Nate did not have to ask who she was reading. Logan had been present in the room all week without ever stepping inside it. "I hope you do not overthink this," Brooke said, smoothing the sleeve of her coat. Nate looked at the suitcase, then at her face. "A vacation with your ex is not something I have to invent in my head." Her mouth tightened. "That is exactly what I mean. You always frame things in the worst possible way. I frame them by naming what they are." Brooke picked up the suitcase handle. "If you trust me, let me handle this like an adult." Nate almost answered, but the words had already become a circle. Trust, adult, closure, jealousy. She had built a vocabulary where every road led back to him being unreasonable. So he did not enter the circle again. He opened the door for her. Cold air came in with the rain. Brooke seemed surprised by that, as if part of her had expected him to block the doorway and give her one final argument she could use to justify leaving. Instead, he only said, "Have a safe trip." She stared at him for a second. "That is all. That is all." The disappointment in her eyes was quick, but Nate saw it. She wanted resistance. Resistance would prove he was controlling. She wanted pleading. Pleading would prove she still had power. She wanted anger. Anger would make Logan's calm attention feel cleaner by comparison. Nate gave her none of it. Brooke stepped outside, rolled the suitcase down the wet walkway, and got into the rideshare waiting by the curb. She did not look back until the door was almost closed. Nate stood in the doorway, his wedding ring cold against his finger, and watched the car pull away through the rain. When the taillights disappeared around the corner, he closed the door and let the silence settle. Then he moved. Not quickly, not dramatically. He walked upstairs, opened the top drawer of his dresser, and took out the small wooden box where he kept old cuff links and his grandfather's watch. He slid off his wedding ring and placed it inside. The sound of metal against wood was soft, but in the quiet bedroom it felt final. He stood there for a moment, looking at the pale circle on his finger, then carried a duffel bag into the room and packed several shirts, jeans, toiletries, and the gray sweater Brooke used to steal on Sunday mornings. He moved them to the home office because the bedroom no longer felt like a shared space. It felt like a place where one person had been expected to wait while the other tested whether the past still had a pulse. At noon, Logan posted a photo from the airport lounge. 2 coffee cups. No faces. A window view of an Oregon runway. The caption said, "Some conversations deserve better scenery." Nate took a screenshot. At 2:30, a charge appeared on the joint account for a Napa hotel deposit. Nate saved that too. At 3, Brooke texted, "Landed. Please do not make this weird while I am gone." Nate read it, saved it, and did not reply. Instead, he opened the timeline and added each entry with the plainness of a man refusing to let emotion be renamed as overreaction. Caroline Hayes answered his call just after 4. Her voice was calm, professional, and without pity. Nate explained the message, the trip, the joint account charges, the public post, and Brooke's insistence that his discomfort was jealousy. Caroline listened, then said, "A person does not need permission to keep their dignity." Nate closed his eyes for one brief second. He had not known how much he needed to hear that from someone outside the storm. By evening, the separation documents were underway, his paycheck had been redirected into an individual account, and a request for written communication on major household matters had been drafted. Nate made himself dinner for one and ate at the kitchen table where the second plate no longer waited. Brooke was in Napa with the man she called unfinished history. Nate was in Portland, finishing something too. He was done being the husband who had to smile while his wife called disrespect freedom. Nate spent the morning in his home office, methodically reviewing every detail of the shared finances, his hands steady despite the knot of frustration in his chest. The sunlight fell through the blinds in sharp lines across the desk where his laptop glowed with spreadsheets and account summaries. He noted every transaction Brooke had made during her trip, carefully recording the dates and amounts, not out of obsession but as preparation for clarity. Each line reminded him that the space they had once shared was now divided by miles and by the decisions she had made, yet he found a strange calm in cataloging the facts. Around noon, he received a message from Caroline Hayes, who checked in with practical advice, reminding him to maintain boundaries and to preserve his own space. Nate nodded silently to himself, appreciating the affirmation that his response could be firm yet unprovocative. By mid-afternoon, he decided to go for a walk along the nearby waterfront, letting the crisp air hit his face as he paced, thinking about the coming weeks. The path was quiet, only the occasional jogger or dog walker passing by, and the water reflected the sky's changing hues, giving him a sense of the world moving steadily onward, indifferent to personal betrayals. During the walk, he rehearsed the conversations he would have once Brooke returned, but he also acknowledged that he might not need to speak at all. Actions could communicate boundaries more powerfully than words. Back at home, he prepared a light dinner, placing his plate at the counter as he reviewed emails from work, maintaining routine and normalcy in the absence of shared domestic life. By evening, Nate had compiled notes on future plans, both personal and professional, ensuring that he could move forward without being pulled back into arguments or emotional manipulation. The house, once echoing with shared laughter, now held only the sound of his own footsteps, yet he recognized that solitude could be a space for reflection, not loneliness. As night fell, he checked his phone and saw Brooke's brief text, "I am fine." He did not reply, understanding that response or acknowledgement was unnecessary. The world did not demand his reaction, and in withholding it, he preserved his dignity. Nate sat by the window, looking at the city lights, contemplating the choices ahead and the clarity he had gained. He allowed himself a moment to acknowledge disappointment and then set it aside, feeling the balance shift toward self-possession. Each decision he had cataloged and each boundary he had established contributed to a sense of control and independence that Brooke's actions had tried to destabilize. The house was quiet, the night calm, and Nate felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he could navigate this period with intelligence, patience, and steadfastness, maintaining his integrity while the world continued to unfold outside his window, indifferent yet full of potential. Brooke came home from Napa on Monday afternoon with sunglasses pushed into her hair, a carry-on suitcase behind her, and the confident exhaustion of someone who had spent 3 days preparing a speech she believed would end the problem. The Portland sky was low and gray, rain misting across the porch, the same kind of weather that used to make her say she loved coming home to warmth. But when she opened the front door, the house did not greet her the way it always had. No smell of dinner, no music from the kitchen, No Nate walking out from the office with tired eyes and too much patience. The living room was neat, almost too neat, and the silence had structure. Brooke rolled her suitcase into the hallway and called, "Nate." He came from the home office, wearing a dark sweater, calm, clean-shaven, and different in a way she noticed before she understood. His left hand was bare. Her eyes went to it immediately. "Where is your ring?" Nate did not answer that question. He walked to the kitchen table, where a white envelope sat beside a folder. "You should read this first." Brooke gave a small laugh, the kind meant to make the room less serious. "Nate, please. I am tired. It was just a trip. Nothing happened the way you are probably imagining." He looked at her without anger. That was what unsettled her most. Anger would have given her something to push against. His calm gave her nowhere to hide. "Read it," he said. Brooke opened the envelope with a sharp motion and saw Caroline Hayes's letterhead at the top. Separation notice. Review of joint account activity. Request for written communication regarding major household and financial matters. Attached documentation. Message dated Thursday, 7:14 in the evening. Hotel deposit. Flight confirmation. Joint account charges. Public post by Logan Pierce. Travel-related expenses. Her face changed line by line. "You got a lawyer?" "Yes." "Because I went away for 3 days?" Nate rested one hand on the back of a chair. "Because you told your husband you were going on vacation with your ex and instructed him not to be jealous like his dignity was an inconvenience." Brooke's cheeks flushed. "That is not fair." "No," Nate said. "Using our money for the trip and then calling my reaction jealousy was not fair." She dropped the papers onto the table. "I needed closure." "Then you should have closed the door without asking me to hold it open from home." For a moment, she looked exactly like the woman he remembered from Cannon Beach, hurt and defensive, wanting comfort after creating the wound. But Nate did not step toward her. That absence finally reached her. She picked up her phone and walked onto the back porch, dialing Logan with trembling fingers. He answered with easy warmth at first. "You made it back?" Brooke lowered her voice. "Nate has a lawyer. There is a separation notice. He documented the trip, the hotel, everything." The warmth disappeared. "Wait, why is my name involved?" Brooke gripped the railing. "Because you posted the airport photo. Because we went to Napa. Because he knows." Logan exhaled, and suddenly he sounded less like unfinished history and more like a man protecting himself. "Brooke, I thought you were handling your marriage. You said this trip mattered." "It did. I mean, it was good to reconnect, but I do not want to be pulled into a divorce." The word reconnect felt cheap now, thin and useless against the legal pages on her kitchen table. "You told me Nate was making me feel trapped." "I said you needed to figure out what you wanted," Logan replied carefully. "That is not the same as me being responsible for what you decided." Brooke closed her eyes. The rain touched her face in cold specks. In Napa, Logan had spoken softly under vineyard lights about old timing, missed chances, and the version of her he still remembered. Now, with consequence attached, every romantic sentence had turned into a disclaimer. "So what was this to you?" she asked. Logan paused. "Brooke, do not make this dramatic. We are adults." Adults. The same word she had used on Nate. The same polished shield for something selfish. She ended the call without saying goodbye and stood on the porch until the screen went dark in her hand. When she went back inside, Nate was still at the table, placing the documents back into the folder. He did not ask what Logan said. He did not need to. Brooke's face had already told him. "He does not want to be involved," she said, hating how small it sounded. Nate nodded once. "Of course he does not. You do not have to sound like you expected that." "I did expect it." Her eyes filled. "Then why did you let me go?" Nate looked at the suitcase by the hallway. The same suitcase she had rolled out while telling him to trust her. "Because stopping you would have made me the villain in the story you already wanted to tell. Letting you go let the truth finish the sentence." Brooke sat down slowly. The trip she had imagined as closure had not closed the past. It had opened the present and shown her the difference between a man who made her feel remembered and a man who had made her feel safe. Logan wanted the glow of being chosen, not the weight of what choosing him cost. Nate had carried the weight for 7 years, and now he was setting it down in front of her, page by page, with no need to raise his voice. The final meeting happened 2 days later in Caroline Hayes's office, a quiet second-floor space in downtown Portland where rain traced the windows and every document on the table looked more honest than any explanation Brooke had brought with her. Nate sat beside Caroline with his hands folded, his wedding ring still absent, his face calm in a way Brooke could no longer mistake for weakness. Across from him, Brooke held a tissue in one hand and stared at the timeline Caroline had placed between them. Thursday, 7:14 in the evening. The message telling Nate she was going on vacation with Logan and not to be jealous. Saturday morning, departure from Portland. Saturday afternoon, airport lounge post with 2 coffee cups. Saturday evening, Napa hotel deposit from the joint account. Sunday, additional charges. Monday, return home and separation notice. Every line was plain. Every line removed the softness Brooke had tried to place around the trip. It was not what you think, she said, but her voice had no strength behind it. Nate looked at her, not unkindly, and that almost hurt worse. I do not need to imagine what it was. I know what it meant. Brooke shook her head. I was confused. Logan brought up old feelings, and I thought if I understood them, I could come back clearer. Caroline stayed silent, letting Nate decide whether the sentence deserved an answer. He took a slow breath. You did not lose me in Napa, he said. You lost me when you thought I should smile for the trip. Brooke closed her eyes. That was the sentence she had been trying not to hear since she walked back into the house and saw the envelope on the table. Nate continued, his voice steady. This was never about jealousy. Jealousy is wanting what someone else has. I am walking away from what chose to leave. The room went quiet except for the rain against the glass. Brooke looked down at the documents, at the message she had typed so casually, at the words "do not be jealous" sitting there like a small insult that had grown into the shape of a marriage ending. I thought you would trust me, she whispered. Trust is not silence, Nate said. Trust is not asking your husband to stay home while you go test the past, and then calling his pain immature. Tears slipped down Brooke's face, but Nate did not reach across the table. For 7 years, he had reached first. He had driven through rain, made coffee, built routines, turned safety into a home she could rest in. He had believed peace was a gift. She had treated it like a guarantee. Caroline reviewed the next steps: temporary separation terms, financial boundaries, written communication, and a full accounting of joint expenses. Nothing about it sounded dramatic. That made it final. The marriage was not ending in a storm. It was ending in paper, timestamps, and the quiet withdrawal of a man who no longer agreed to be shamed for having boundaries. When the meeting ended, Brooke followed Nate into the hallway. Is there really no way back? She asked. He stopped near the elevator, rainlight gray across his face. For a moment, he looked like the man at Cannon Beach, the man she once called safe, the man she had mistaken for something that would always be waiting. There was a way back before you left, he said. You just chose to call it jealousy. The elevator doors opened. Brooke whispered his name, but Nate stepped inside without turning the moment into another negotiation. As the doors closed, she understood that Logan had not taken Nate's place. He had only revealed how little she had protected it. What do you think hurt Brooke more, losing Logan's illusion, or realizing Nate was not jealous at all, only done being disrespected? Share your thoughts, because stories like this remind us that loyalty is not weakness, boundaries are not insecurity, and real love should never ask someone to smile while being replaced. If you believe quiet strength, dignity, and hard truth deserve to be heard, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next story.